I'm going to go through a few things that hopefully may challenge some of you. You may or may not have heard some of this before. I'm going to cover quite a broad range of things. Going to leave most of the grazing management up to Alejandro. Just a little bit, not much of myself. I've got a property, central New South Wales. It's about 600 mil rainfall, higher than most of South Australia, but it's actually lower than here. My rainfall is. About 300 k's from Sydney. Now, it's a restored grassland now, and that in itself is an important thing to remember. Central Tablelands, New South Wales. A few different enterprises. Mainly we run merino sheep, and we've run merino sheep since the 1860s. Not me personally, but my great-grandparents settled there in the 1860s, and we've had merino sheep right through. Grow some crops, but I grow them in a different manner. I grow them using pasture cropping methods I developed. The few different merino sheep are our main enterprise, but interestingly, native grass seed sales is one of our main enterprises, and it's actually getting up in value, certainly in profit, to our wool enterprise. And the only reason that I've got that enterprise now is because I restored the grassland. But it also points out that we can develop a few different enterprises. We don't have to have just a basic traditional enterprise. And on farms now, there's a lot of opportunity in having different enterprises, providing that enterprise complements the other enterprise you have on your farm in financially and ecologically. They have to complement each other. They can't be antagonistic towards each other. The standard old sheep wheat enterprise that's been in Australia for 100 years or more doesn't work because they don't complement each other, at least ecologically. They're antagonistic to each other. And that's the wrong way to go. A few other enterprises. Kelpie dog stud, we sell dogs all over the world. And also have a merino ram enterprise as well, ram side. So, how do we restore our farms? Manage dry seasons and be more profitable. And obviously many of you have been thinking about dry season here, and also profitable. It needs to all work together. The only way to work something out is to have a look at what's happened in the past. So to be more profitable, we should look at what's gone wrong. How come we aren't more profitable now? What's gone wrong with our farms and why? Why are our costs so high? Many paddocks and whole properties that I see, and this is not just simply Australia, it's in other countries as well. Whole properties have become unproductive, covered in weeds, hard compacted soil, but there's a pattern to this. Very few of those farms that are like that, covered in weeds, hard compacted soils, very few of them have perennial species on them. Most of these farms have no native species or not even any perennial grass type or pasture species. And that's a big part of the problem. The property at home had, only in the 1990s, had 60% weeds, bare soil, and very few perennial grasses. So I didn't start off with a grassland. There was no grassland there. There were remnants. There was an odd native plant on it, but it was dominated mostly by clover and ryegrasses and things like that. To understand what's gone wrong, we really need to look at what the grasslands were like pre-European times. And we need to go back pre-European because here and all over Australia and most of other countries as well, started to decline when they were colonised. And mostly here in Australia at least, the damage was done because the Europeans didn't understand this country. They had no idea, and how could they? No one's to blame, really, but they tried to manage Australia as though it was Europe. and it's been a disaster. The only people that knew how to manage it were our Aboriginal people, and they managed it very, very well for tens of thousands of years. We came along, like Europeans came along and didn't listen to or look at any of those methods that worked for thousands of years. And we need to go back to some of those things to get it right. What caused the destruction of our grasslands? Mostly this: inappropriate grazing methods, set stock grazing, and ploughing. Like the disc ploughs that have been used for 150 years or more, it just simply kills grasslands. Animals aren't quite as bad, although that picture on there it doesn't want to be that bad. But ploughs have been a major disaster, and in some of the early settled areas of the country, there's very few grasslands left. As here, there's not a lot of grasslands here as well. How do grasslands function? To understand about pasture, like I'm not necessarily talking only about native grasslands here. We're looking at perennial species that function like a grassland, and if we have natives in there, that's even better. But it doesn't have to have all native species in it, or even any, but it needs to function like a grassland. Australia's original grassland was very complex. There's over 1,000 grassland species in Australia, and in any one area there would be 200 to 300. This area here would have had 200 to 300 species in it originally, which is amazing. How many species in your pasture now? You probably count them on one hand. Most people could. So that's a lot of the reason why the wheels have fallen off most of our farms, is that there's not enough species in our pastures, and probably worse than that, the recommendations we get are that one or two species, and almost always annuals. I mean, you're setting yourself up for a drought every time if it's only annual species, and especially if they come from the other side of the planet, if they've come from Europe, which most of the species that we grow are. There's over 700 orchid species in Australia's grasslands, which is really quite fascinating. They're ground orchids, and there were a lot of flowering plants in our grasslands. And I think Alejandro is going to talk a bit more about that later. The grasslands, well, all over Australia, but in South Australia here we're talking mostly about, they have evolved to tolerate moderately low rainfall. And much of eastern South Australia, east of here, were covered by iron grasslands. Our grasslands everywhere, just look at them generally, very, very diverse, and they all had a mix of summer growing plants and winter growing plants. C3 and C4, which I'm going to explain in a minute. It's fairly simple stuff. All of this is actually fairly simple. So, why are we talking about grasslands? If we understand how grasslands function, we can use that as a model on how to manage and run our farms. And our farms should function as ecosystems. No one ever talks about ecology in relation to agriculture. Our farms, it is absolutely critical if our farms and soils function as ecosystems. And one of the reasons, if it functions as an ecosystem, we have good nutrient cycling, we don't have diseases, we don't have insect attack, all the problems that we try to address in conventional agriculture go away if our farms function as ecosystems. Grasslands are about species diversity, and that is about not only plants, we need huge species diversity of plants, but animals and insects. People forget about the insect side of things. Insects are vital to our grasslands and the health of our farms. We also always seem to focus on the insects that eat plants or damage things, but most insects are beneficial. If our farms function more like grassland, we'll solve most of our soil health problems, weeds, disease, insect problems, reduce costs and be more profitable. We're not really talking about a standard pasture here, you're probably gathering. Types of plants in a grassland. Now remember, you'll start to relate this to your own pasture shortly, I hope. Now they're winter growing plants, and they can be perennial and annuals. Perennial meaning long-lived, annual just 12 months. And they're called C3 plants, but also, and including in these areas here, we had summer growing plants and grasses. So, and the same thing, perennials, long-lived plants, and short-lived annual plants, like only grow for 12 months. Also, in our grasslands, there was forbs. Like forbs are basically flowering plants, forbs and herbs, and scattered trees and shrubs. What is C3 and C4? Now, this is a really simple explanation. It refers to the different pathways that plants use to capture carbon dioxide. Now, all plants need carbon dioxide to grow, and sunlight. They're the two main things. The way they capture carbon dioxide makes them more tolerant mainly of heat and low rainfall. And in other words, the C4 plants are very tolerant of heat and low rainfall. These environments, we need more of those plants. A C4 plant can be perennial or annual, and we'll work our way through this, or at least were, pre-European times, a dominant type of plant in Australia. And of that, whatever I had there before, 1,085 species in Australia, the majority of them were these summer growing plants. Now that's interesting when you look around now and there's none here. So it shows how much damage we've done. Not you personally, the damage has been done quite a few years ago by the methods I've mentioned. So these ones are mostly summer growers. They have very high water use efficiency. They tolerate heat from 25 to 35 degrees and even higher than that. They're fine in those really hot days. They generally produce more dry matter, but it's of lower quality than the winter grasses. Less than 1% of the Earth's plants on the planet, like Earth plants, are these C4s. Now, just while I'm on that, those C4 plants, if they were the dominant species in Australia, and they are tolerant of hot, dry conditions, and grasses that in this country have been identified at least 50 million, but probably 30 to 40 million years ago. And if this country was dominated by these types of plants, it's been bloody hot and dry here for a long time, so get used to it. These things have been here for millions of years because it's been hot and dry. Like that, you don't get many of them in Europe, or hardly any. They're all C3s in Europe. But Australia and Africa, and some parts of the US, the southern parts of the US, have a lot of these species. Now, this is just examples of them. If we go down the bottom, I'll give you a bit of an idea. The annual crops, which aren't grown around here, are things like millet and sorghum. They're C4 annual crop species. So I'll give you a bit of an idea. Corn fits in there, even sugarcane does, but we won't worry about sugarcane here. Up the top, just there's just some of them which you may know. Windmill grass, kangaroo grass, box grass, which is Paspaludin red grass, wiregrass, all of those are native species, but there's a lot more than that. The introduced ones, which you can sow all native ones as well, but you can sow digit, green panic and Rhodes grass. Now those three have come from the African grasslands, but they will fill a niche if you need to, or if you want to sow the others. They won't become weeds. They're not like buffalo grass, which is also African, but has become an environmental weed. C3, this is the other side of the scale, are mainly winter species, perennial or annual again, mostly autumn and spring growing. They're growing in the cooler parts of the year. Require more water than the C4s or the summer grasses. Are tolerant of cold. They are not tolerant of heat. Produce high quality feed, and most of the plants on the planet are actually the C3 ones. And things like, down the bottom again, wheat, oats and barley are annual, C3 plants. We grow them in the winter when it's cooler. If we look at the introduced species, now these are the ones that mostly we sow as pasture species. Phalaris, ryegrass, cocksfoot, fescue. Most of those, or well, all of them, perennial ryegrass can be perennials. The native ones, which grow at the same time as those, are wallaby grass, weeping grass, common wheatgrass, plains grass, spear grass, all of those, and there's more of them as well. Forbs and herbs, a very vital part of this. There were a lot of forbs and herbs in our grasslands here in Australia. And things like glycines, which are a climbing plant, a bit like a pea. Orchids, lilies, irises, daisies, all these things were in our grasslands mixed through the grasses. They weren't just grass, is what I'm getting at. And they filled in the gaps between the grass tussocks. If we're trying to restore our farms and we want something to function like our grassland forbs and herbs, we can sow and do so clover, lucerne, chicory, plantain. They're forbs and herbs as well. We can, if we've got nothing there and we have to re-sow everything, we can sow enough species so that it'll start to function like a grassland, not just a two-species pasture. That's a bloody disaster, the two-species pasture. Now, if we look at this graph, along the bottom are just months of the year, up the side are just biomass, you know, how much these things can produce. And we look at that, the pink line are C4s and the blue line are C3s. Now this is how grassland functions. Now if we look at that, in the summer those warm season grasses are growing, in the winter the cool season ones are growing, and guess what? Our farms can have feed year round. If we can replicate what Mother Nature created. Look at that. That is what your pasture looks like here, without any summer grasses in it. Also, this is something that you'd be aware of. Going through the year, and it's okay, we've got a good season, you've got lots of clover and ryegrass, and you know before we start, you're dreading the first hot day in October, because as soon as the first hot day comes, you know there's not going to be any feed. Going to have to start feeding these animals soon because there'll be no feed left in the summer. Guess what? This is the problem. It's not lack of rainfall, it's you don't have any warm season or summer growing plants in those pastures. That's the main problem. Here, this is just the closest I could get to your rainfall here. And it really surprised me, you get 717 mils average rain at Mount Barker. One of the things that people say, oh, we don't get any summer rain. Those summer things don't grow. They don't grow with two reasons. They're being killed and no one's bothered trying to plant them, because all the advice that we get is that, grow those winter ones. And we end up in a summer drought every year. So we just look at that. Okay, you don't get a lot of summer rain here, but you do get some. You get 107, this is average, whatever average means, 174 mil from October till March. So there is enough rain in the summer to grow some of those C4 and summer grasses. They were here originally. There's no reason at all why they can't be. If you look at some of the grassland maps it's pretty hard to find it. There's not a lot of information I could find on grasslands here originally, but you can find some. There were all of those C4 grasses that I was talking about here in these areas, and over most of South Australia, not just here. And not only that, you've got enough rain here to also produce enough dry feed to get through the summer with those cool season ones as well. But if we add some warm season ones with it, and not only that, those warm season grasses, half the reason why Victoria, not so much, well, and here, get burnt out every year is because you have nothing green in the summer. Originally you did. And I got burnt out in 1979 at home, major fire, because we only had, at that stage, C3, cool season grasses. We had nothing green in the summer. How do we restore our grasslands? How do we fix our farm, nutrient decline, insect attack, all these problems that we're associated with agriculture? If you go to a conventional, you've probably been to a more conventional field day, and everyone talks about the problems. You know, oh, we have an insect attack and we've got to fertilise and we're getting diseases in everything. And how about looking at the positive things, what we can do instead of the negatives? So, but we can fix that, not with spending money, but just managing differently, which is what today's about. And how can we do that without spending heaps of money? This is not an anti-talk about fertiliser or anything like that. But we need to do it better. Although fertiliser and pesticides can be an aid to agriculture, they certainly have created many problems. And they usually prevent our farms from functioning as ecosystems. So especially pesticides, it's one of the worst things we do. And fungicides. Increasing fertiliser and pesticides will not fix our farms, because that isn't the problem. The ecosystem's broken. It is not lack of fertiliser that's the problem, but that's often what we get told. Our farm soil has become dysfunctional. And it's become dysfunctional for a few reasons. One is the fertiliser and pesticides we're putting on create the problem, but also our management also creates the problem. We don't have enough species diversity. When it becomes dysfunctional, that's why we have to have increasing amounts of fertiliser and pesticides. A couple of days ago, I was down on a property down the York Peninsula cropping place, getting people, I was asked to help them with some advice on their farm. But the general story with these people, they're continuous croppers now, unfortunately, so removed all their livestock. Their fertiliser and pesticides continue to increase every year. They're spending more and more and more money on those inputs. How long can you do that for? I'm not saying, I don't know whether any of you here, is there any croppers here? Should have asked you to do this before, like continuous croppers. I won't chuck rocks at you, promise. No, I didn't think there would be. That's why I'm not talking very much about this that today. But even so, with pastures, the same thing applies with pastures. We're not only necessarily talking about growing crops here, but fertilising pastures, spraying insecticide, pesticides on pastures has the same type of effect. Allow the farm and soil to function as an ecosystem. That is the key to this. When it functions as an ecosystem, soils and the farm itself, a better nutrient cycling, then we need less fertiliser or even none. No insect attack, no insecticide, no plant disease, no fungicide, and less animal diseases as well. We tend to reduce those metabolic diseases that we get in animals. And more profit. I mean, look, if we can reduce those costs, we start to make more profit. But we need to start by fixing the soil, which a lot of people don't realise. But this is not about fertilising. We can fix the soil by growing more plants. And we can grow more plants by changing our grazing management to start with, which is the first point that we should start at. So how do we change and what do we change to? If we modify the way we graze animals and grow crops, we can achieve all of that. I won't bother reading all that out, but we can change if we just simply need to just modify it. We don't need to change anything drastically, and we don't need to go and pick a different enterprise. We can do whatever we're doing now with whatever animals we have, or if we're sowing crops or anything, we just need to tweak it around the edges and we can get the change. Grazing management, I'm not going to talk a lot about grazing management. I love that cartoon, it just about sums up. That's probably why I don't run many cattle. So, okay, the way we graze animals isn't working. It's not the animal that's the problem here, it's the human managing the animal that's the problem. So everyone wants to either blame sheep or cows or horses for the problem, but it's the human managing them that's the problem. Kills grasslands and pastures, the way we graze them. destroys soil ecosystem and the farm ecosystem. This, people that were at the talk last night, I had this same slide up. That slide that Dr. Christine Jones put together just about sums the whole thing up. Now, they're the same species, perennial plant, native perennial plant. Doesn't matter what it is other than it's a perennial. Now, the poor little fella on the left-hand side has just been continuously grazed. The one on the right has been allowed to fully recover. The one in the middle, well, halfway in between, it has been grazed. If we look at the one on the right, you'll notice it's got a big root system and a big leaf system. And grasses tend to a mirror image in biomass of the grass on top and the roots underneath. The little fella on the other side being continuously grazed, that's exactly what he is. He's got little short leaves and little short root system. We asked the question, how many animals can we feed on that? Well, not many. But maybe even more important, or just as important, we start to look at the root system on that plant, because no one thinks about root systems on plants, and ask the question, how much water can that plant get and source? Well, bugger all, really, with a little short root system, hasn't got to stop raining for long, and that poor little fella's going to do it hard. Remember, it's the same species of plant, just managed differently. Now, if we think about nutrients, we talk about how needing to put fertiliser on all the time, and think about that little fella, how much nutrients is he getting? How much phosphorus and nitrogen and all those things is that little fella getting? Again, bugger all. Poor little fella's doing it real hard. And the animals grazing that poor little plant are doing it hard also. If we allow our plants to fully recover before we graze, not only are we producing more feed for our animals, we're feeding our soil at the same time. Around plants, around the rhizosphere, around the roots of plants, there's billions of soil microbes. I mean billions in a healthy soil. Most of them live off dead and decaying plant material and sugars from the plant itself. The plants pump sugars out into the soil called root exudates, and which feed microbes. Again, we look at this, picking on this poor little fella over here. You're not going to feed many microbes with that little fella either. However, the big one, the fully recovered one, is feeding billions of microbes. So our soils continually improve. If we get into that type of grazing management, we can continually improve our soils. And that's what we should be aiming to do. Let our plants grow a lot bigger before we graze them. Holistic grazing management with long plant recovery times encourages the growth of perennial plant species. It discourages the growth of annual weeds, because with this method, when we grow our plants big like that and we graze them, we put a lot of material on the soil surface. Mulch. Now, you won't get any mulch off that little fella. Not enough leaf there. That big one, yes, got our cattle or sheep grazing where they'll eat quite a lot of it, but they'll put a lot of it onto the ground. Now, I'll ask you a question. I know all the ladies here will know the answer to this. Why do we put straw in our gardens? Why do we put mulch on our gardens? Anyone know? Someone will know? Yep. Moisture, yes. So we don't have to water it so often. Anything else? So suppress weeds. You've heard all this before. There's another one. It also control the temperature of the soil and soil surface as well. All of those things we do in a garden. We've known that for hundreds of years. Why the hell don't we do it on our farms? Okay, we can't bring in mulch and litter like we do in a garden, but we can grow it. We can grow it with those big plants and use the animals to trample it, add manure and urine with nutrients, and our farms start functioning a bit more like a garden. There's lots of advantages of growing big plants. Often people will tell you, oh, that's a waste of feed. Not a bloody waste of feed at all. It's restoring your farm. That mulch will also reduce the weeds and almost eliminate most annual weeds, improve soil structure and soil health, nutrient cycling. We can enable drought planning. I'm going to get onto the drought side of things later. But this gives us time in a grazing rotation to plan for droughts, to plan for anything. So, and more profit. It's certainly more profitable. I'm just going to move on a little bit with growing crops and pastures and things. Ploughing soil is a major cause of degraded and destroyed grasslands. And all that modern cropping methods have done is replace the plough with a boom spray. The philosophy of farming is still the same. All we're doing is killing things now. Instead of with a plough, we're killing it with a herbicide. So the whole process hasn't changed much. I changed the way I grew crops because of declining grasslands and increasing costs. In 1993, I developed a different way of growing crops called pasture cropping. And that's just a photo of it there, the green in amongst that are C4 summer grasses coming up underneath that crop as it's being harvested. I won't dwell too much on this because there's probably not too many people interested in crops here. But we can also use these methods for restoring grasslands as well, but certainly improving the farm and soil ecosystems as well. This one could interest you with your animals, the multi-species crops. Oh, how many people here grow forages like winter feed like oats or anything like that? Anyone here grow that? A few of you do. Okay. Most of the time, and for a long time here in Australia, we've grown oats and cereals to feed animals. Nothing wrong with that. It works well. We need to be careful about how we grow them, as in we don't want to be killing everything to grow some feed. But I won't dwell on that too much now. Now, in 2010, I planted a multi-species crop into a grassland, which I'd called multi-species pasture cropping. And there's can be 6 to 10 species in these mixes. And that's sort of mostly our oats and brassica and tillage radish and turnips, all this sort of stuff. Exceptionally good stock feed. A very, very good stock feed, but a bit more than that. This feed, I haven't got the trial results here, but I did a trial, an MLA/Landcare trial on a multi-species crop compared to a single species barley crop. The animal performance was magnificent on it. The weight gains were double and far healthier animals, faster fattening, faster growth rates and more feed. Now if you think about it, we feed our animals on one or two species, or one species with a crop, and we wonder why we have problems. The poor old cow or the old ewes only got one thing to eat. We wonder why she gets a bellyache. All we're really doing here is supplying animals with a varied diet, which we're told we should have a varied diet ourselves, but we feed the old cow the same one old thing and wonder why they get crook. That's why it works. It's really simple. When I developed this method here in Australia, it's the fastest adoption of anything I've seen. People have adopted all over Australia because they can see the advantages of very high quality stock feed. However, those mixes of species, talking about plant diversity in a grassland before, and how we can fix our soils and that with plant diversity, those species, now they're only annuals and growing just for stock feed, then it's not a permanent pasture, those species. But it rapidly improves the soil. It restores the soil ecosystems, get things cycling, feeds microbes, it rapidly fixes the soil if we can get that sort of diversity in a forage. But remember, it's a forage annual system. Yep.
What was the preparation for that? You still have the perennials growing?
Okay, with the perennials, depending on what my grassland's like, with me, it's zero till. Sometimes I don't use herbicide, depends on what weeds are there. Other times I use a very selective herbicide. I haven't used Roundup for 25 years or so. And that's because Roundup just it works too well and kills everything. So I don't use Roundup and I haven't for a long time. But more selectives you can use. This is not necessarily about not using herbicide or using a fertiliser, but be more careful about how we do it. I graze the grassland really hard before we start. There's a reason for that, and we can get away without using herbicides. We graze it really short. Remember that I was talking about that little plant grazed real hard with a little short root system. If we do that deliberately so that we can plant a crop into it without killing that plant, we stress that plant, the perennial plant, deliberately so we get a better crop result. So using animals to stress those plants but not kill them. That's not good grazing practice, but it can be a good practice to use in getting a crop established without herbicide. How do we fix our pasture? Just some stuff on what we can do with sowing pastures. Remember, we've spoken about grazing management is the first thing to do. So this is not instead of, it's about if your pasture is totally stuffed, really, with many are, how do we re-sow things? Sowing things can be a way of restoring your property's pasture if all the pasture and grassland has been lost through overgrazing or cropping. But that's the last thing we should do. We should get our grazing right first. We need to do those things. Stop ploughing as well. Remember that set stock grazing is the cause of pasture decline, and we can use those. I mentioned those pasture cropping methods a while ago to add pasture. You can, instead of using that to sow a crop, like I mentioned before, we can use those same methods, direct drill, to establish pasture. But keep what we've already got. If we've got an odd perennial in there, keep that one there. We don't need to kill it and add to it. Is a far better way of doing it. Now, in higher rainfall areas, pasture does not necessarily need to be native. Certainly up in the Flinders, it has to be native. That's about the only thing that'll live up there. Totally different management for people up there. But it doesn't need to be native, but it should have good species diversity. That's absolutely critical. Absolutely. It can consist mainly of perennials, and it should function like a grassland. One of the things that we do, and I used to manage like this, we grow plants that want to die and kill plants that want to live. In relation to sowing pasture, sow the stuff that wants to live on your soil and your environment. Don't get carried away with some new whiz-bang, very expensive seed that's probably been developed in New Zealand or on the other side of the planet and expect it to thrive here. So do some homework on what will do well here, but always focus on perennials. Nothing wrong with having an odd annual, but you want the majority to be perennials. It should contain a mix of grass species, forbs, herbs and legumes, like our grasslands did. It should have species diversity. It should function like a grassland, but a lot of species diversity and contain a mix of winter species and summer species. Why? Why have diverse pasture? We can then start to produce high quality feed year round, even with your low summer rainfall here. Because remember, your soils will start to improve as you get more perennials in there. You'll increase the water holding capacity of the soils when you start to get more big, deep rooted plants and ground cover. Those perennials are long lived, increase soil carbon, improve soil water holding capacity. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Control weeds, restore the soil and the farm ecosystems, and make more profit. Forbs and herbs. I've mentioned that in the grass when I was talking specifically about grasslands. Things like chicory, plantain, lucerne, clover. Well, the first three are perennials. Clover isn't, but they're all forbs and herbs. Those ones, which we sow anyway now, but we can add them to our pastures so that it functions more as a grassland. Very high quality feed in those. The lucerne and chicory are summer growers as well, and both of them are pretty tough plants. The chicory certainly is. It's got a great big taproot system on it. Now, introduced summer C4 grasses such as digit, green panic on the roads can be sown as a mix. What's wrong with annual plants? We've been talking about perennials. A small number of annuals can be okay, like clovers are annuals. They can be okay. They produce high quality feed and fast growth. But too many annuals, especially if you're dominated by mostly annuals, will create droughts on farms. And if you only have annual species, you're only 2 or 3 weeks from a drought, or 3 weeks anyway, because they'll just shut down. They've got no intention of living it past producing some seed for next generation. They've got shallow roots mostly, ineffective water use, and don't produce enough ground cover. So you don't want many of them in there. Pasture should be dominated by perennials. What pasture species you should sow? I'm not going to tell you which ones to sow. Just be careful when you get information on what to sow here that they don't just tell you the same old thing. And it'll be C3s, annuals, maybe an odd perennial. Get more educated on what is out there. Don't grow plants that want to die. That's the main thing. Suited to your environment here, and that can be whatever conditions you are anywhere really, whether it's hot, dry climate or cold, wet climate. This one's generally hot, dry, and suited to your soil type. They need to be suited to mostly, not sure here, but most of South Australia has alkaline soils. So the plants need to be suited to that type of soil. I'm just going to talk a little bit about native grasses and harvesting and cleaning and that now, just a little bit, because I think there's a bit of interest in natives and that here. I mentioned earlier the native grassland at home now is one of our best enterprises. There's virtually no cost in it. It just grows anyway. And we harvest seed and clean it and sell. And we produce about 2 tonne of seed a year and sell. There's a few different types of harvesters around. That's a brush harvester that I made, the one on the left. And the other one's is a vacuum harvester. And seed cleaning, you can buy lots of seed cleaners. You can spend $40,000 or $50,000 on them. I wasn't going to spend that, so I made this. It's based on a harvester, riddles, like a table cleaner. So we can clean them. Some of our native grasses don't have awns on them at all, little round seeds. Certainly our Paspalidiums or warrego, armgrass, those types of plants, which is what that is there. I've got a bit more on that in a minute, on some of those seeds. Sowing, the seed that doesn't have awns on can just be sown through a normal seed box and direct drilled ideally, but however you can get it in the ground, but it can go through a normal seed box like people sow loosening, clover or pastures with. The ones with awns, a different story. And generally they need spreading, but they're okay to spread because the awns on a grass is the mechanism it uses to get itself into the soil. When the tail on it, the awn, gets moisture, it starts to curl and it buries itself into the soil. So you don't necessarily, the best way is just to spread them. They won't go through a seed box. I've been involved in a partly research project, but also working with Aboriginal group at the Gamilaroi people at northern New South Wales. Mostly the ladies, Aboriginal ladies, and Sydney University. They've got a research centre up there. We were looking at what uses the Aboriginal people had of seed and how it was used. And the ladies, the Gamilaroi ladies, have baking days with the seed. Like the research centre have got all the processing equipment and they grind into flour. And the ladies have great fun working out rediscovering a lot of times how to bake the flours. And there's some really interesting information came out about it. I was looking at trying to find out myself about whether you could bake some of these, like grind and produce some food from these seed, grassland seed. And with no information at all, but I tried this stuff and I was using one of the Paspalidium species, little round seeds, and baked this thing. It was inedible. And I thought, well, I must have done something wrong. But then I started to think about it. I said, well, if a whole nation, like here in Australia, can be trained to eat something as unpalatable as Vegemite, we'll learn to eat anything. So then I started to think, well, it mightn't be a problem that this stuff doesn't suit my palate. But anyway, no, the Gamilaroi ladies, they've been doing a great job with it, and they know how to bake these things. So where I'm getting at here, there's potentially a huge potential for everyone with native grasslands and native seed. And also, there's quite a few Aboriginal groups getting involved in this and growing. Bruce Pascoe, for example, is doing some stuff in southeastern New South Wales. You may have heard of Bruce with the Dark Emu book. And it's good to have a research organisation like Sydney Uni looking at a lot of this stuff and testing the health benefits and all sorts of things on this. And there's quite a lot of information available now on what they've been doing there. We're back to drought. How do we manage droughts? There's not a lot we can do with lack of rainfall, but there is a lot we can do to improve our soils so that we can hold more water in our soils. And that's really is the key. We can't manage the climate and the rainfall, but we can manage things on our own farm. If we increase soil carbon, we'll increase the water holding capacity on our properties. But plants are the only practical thing that we have to increase soil carbon. Grow more plants. And plant diversity is the key to increasing soil carbon. The photo on the right-hand side is a photo of, and that's 500 mil, 2 feet. These soils were only about 20 metres apart. One on that side is in my paddock. The other one is in my brother's paddock just through the fence. Now, the only difference here is that I changed my management and he stayed the same. And we've built soil now to, well, at least 500 mils, topsoil to 500 mils. That's taken 10 years or so. It doesn't happen overnight. Whereas his is exactly the same as it always was. That yellow there is a sodic clay layer. But not only that, where I'm getting to with this, the carbon in the one on the left is increased by 60 tonne per hectare of carbon, which is 213 tonne of carbon dioxide. It has removed from the atmosphere and put in the soil per hectare to a foot. So which is only half of that. Where we're getting at here, if we increase soil carbon by 1% to 30 centimetres or a foot, we can increase the water holding capacity of our soil by 168,000 litres per hectare. Now 168,000 doesn't sort of mean much, but that's almost 17 mils of rain. Every time it dries out and you get more rain, it holds it again. It holds that, that's how much extra water we can hold in our soil, and that's only with 1% increase in carbon. Most of the soils now, especially the farming and cropping soils, are 1% or even lower. So they're not holding any water at all. Now, if we look at this, fortunately our Strzelecki, the explorer, measured a lot of our soils around Australia. Well, he did through New South Wales into Victoria and Tasmania. Didn't come over here. As far as I know, he didn't. But that's okay. But what he found was some of these soils had actually had carbon to 15% on them. So, but many of our grasslands had soil organic carbon levels at 6 to 10%. Remember now they're under 1, most of them. If we look at water holding capacity of something like that, they had the capacity to hold 1 million litres per hectare. 1 million. You're not going to suffer from many droughts if you have that sort of, that soil with that much water, stored water in the soil. It holds it like a sponge, it'll keep it there, plants can source it, so you don't need a lot of showers to keep that being topped up. That's what was there now. I mean, sorry, that's what was there in those early measurements, 1840s, somewhere around there. The Strzelecki did a lot of the measurement. That's the way to manage droughts and improve our farms. Grow more plants, perennial plants. They restore grassland. So how do we restore our properties? Change the way we graze animals, change the way we grow crops, restore grassland and grow diverse pastures. Grow more plants, plant diversity. Plant diversity will restore our farm, soil and profit. Oh, it's an ad for my book. Yeah, we can fix our farms quite easily. There's no problems there. Just changing management. Thank you.
I'm pretty happy to be back in Australia. I've been already doing some workshops in most the eastern coast and Long Ridge, Queensland. Yep. So excited to be here. I want to start with giving you a little bit of the context on our ranch. Our ranch is in the Chihuahuan Desert, which is the largest desert of North America. And we have a 30,000 acre ranch. Do you understand acres? That's pretty unfair because I say, okay, Australia is metric system. So I've been studying the metric system and they say inches and acres and kilometers, and I say, wow, that's confusing. We have about 9-inch, let's see, I'm changing again. 9-inch annual precipitation, which is, I think, 225 millimeters. Fortunately, the rainfall has been going down and down and down because that branch where I am, is been in the family for 50 years. So we can see that on the first decades, we used to have 12 inches of rain. Now it's going down. And on the last almost 3 years, we have only got 7 inches total on the last 3 years. So the last time that I was in Australia, we were running 700 cows. Now we're running 500 cows. I mean, we definitely have to destock with that kind of rain. Don't believe that we have some kind of magic or something, but. So, who knows that plant? Agave. You know agave? Not everybody knows agave, but probably everybody knows tequila, right? So the problem, this is from central Mexico, it's not from a ranch. But the problem we have is that we're creating a lot of deserts in central Mexico. We call it blue deserts because it's blue agave. And some people are boycotting the agave because of the same reason. Because, you know, we need rains. That area is about 35 inches of rain per year. So when it rains, it just causes a lot of flooding and it takes the topsoil. Because they're like this, the same way like corn producers, they only want to see agave. It's our mindset that whatever is not agave shouldn't be there. It's like we grass farmers, right? Whatever is not grass shouldn't be there. So I want to give you this example because what we did there for a client that really wanted to do regen, we only introduced livestock. But not like livestock, do whatever you want, livestock in a controlled way. So we actually, holistic management with long rest periods, we actually control the livestock with electric fence. That was the only ingredient. So this picture is not like a before and after, it was on the same time. Like 99% of the agave is produced that way, this way. But see at what has been done in a couple of years. So the first thing we did there was rest the area. And then you know what happened when we rested the area? We got a lot of weeds. Because weeds come to try to heal the soil. One of the most difficult things we are teaching farmers and ranchers is actually for them to learn that nature is always trying to help us. Anyone familiar with thistle? Okay, raise your hand who likes thistle. Wow, almost half. No, just kidding. What?
Depends which one.
Depends which one. Some are good and some are not so good?
Yes.
Okay. Well, can you pull a thistle with your bare hands?
Some.
Wow, a brave girl. And no, but no gloves, just your bare hands. Yes, some?
Well, some, not the prickly ones.
Oh, no, I mean the prickly ones.
Okay. No, I need gloves.
Okay, so what is nature telling you? If you cannot leave it alone, right? See, that is the communication we need to have with nature. What is nature trying to tell me? Or even if you have these toxic weeds, you know, or poison weeds, what is nature trying to tell you? Stop doing what you're doing because we're on the wrong direction. So, for example, if any of you tells me, you know, Alejandro? Well, remember I'm Alejandro in Australia, US. In Mexico, they call me Alex. So, if any of you just says, you know, I'm about the same as 10 years ago, probably you're lying to me. Because you cannot stand still. You're working with nature, and nature is so changing, so dynamic. So whatever kind of management you're doing, you're actually going forward or you're going backwards, but you cannot stand still. You're regenerating or you are degrading. And that doesn't mean that it's the whole farm. Some places would be, you'll be able to regenerate, and some places would be you're degrading. But it all depends on your management. What we saw on that land is now that we don't apply sites, you know, when I say sites, insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, now nature is helping us. It brought these predators to get rid of these pests. And that particular client is using multiple species. He brought donkeys and horses and also cattle and sheep. One of the challenges things there, see, there's farmers usually apply a lot of the regen principles, you know, keep the soil cover, living roots, cover diversity, and so on. But it makes it really very difficult for them to manage livestock. And if we don't apply that livestock integration principle, then we will never be independent. We will always be dependent on something. So this is a specialty crop, but still a good example of what livestock can do. So we never seed anything, we never plant anything, we just put livestock. So sometimes it gets out of hand when on the rainy season. It's very difficult to keep the stock and rain with the capacity, but they use like a roller, you know, to fall down when the weeds and grasses are ahead of the livestock. So this is where we are on that red dot, very close to the US. We don't call it America because America is the whole continent. We call it the US. We are part of the Chihuahuan Desert, which involves many states in the US and Mexico. This is the erosion that could happen in the Chihuahuan Desert. It's pretty amazing. And think about it, just with 9 inches. But there's the historical ecological perspective, which Colin just went through. So what are the clues that we have that what was there before? Do you see that layer of carbon? It's more than 1 meter. The woody plants there, which those are mesquites, they could not put that much carbon. So there used to be tall grasslands there. When the Spaniards came to that area, all the grasses were like tall grasses, not even mid-size or tall grasses. But also we have the written evidence from the Spaniards. For example, when that used to be New Spain, which went from Central America all the way to Montana or Montaña, then these guys were trying to find, these priests were trying to find a way from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Monterey, California. So they passed through Salt Lake. Have anyone been in Salt Lake in Utah? Pretty dry, right? Imagine when these guys passed through Salt Lake, they say, we had never seen such a lush, beautiful grasslands in the whole New Spain than the one that are in Salt Lake. So definitely, as Colin said, I mean, we have pretty much degraded the whole place. And it's still degrading because remember what I told you. It's not that, it stopped degrading. I mean, we have to intervene and manage your livestock in order to regenerate. And then there's more recent maps, like the one from our state. Our state is called Chihuahua. You know what Chihuahua? Have you heard the word Chihuahua? The little dogs? Chihuahua is the largest state in Mexico with the smallest dogs. But the fun thing is that you go to Chihuahua, it's like an attraction. And then you're driving along the highway, and then you're gonna see the original wild dogs running along the hills. My recommendation, don't get out of your car because they may be aggressive. And then, even though they have a small bite, there are many. It's like a piranhas. I know that. I'm just teasing you. So what is really interesting about this map is, well, it used to be a very nice climate because imagine all this soil covered with grasslands. But also there used to be otters, an incredible wildlife. Like the last Mexican wolves were trapped in Chihuahua in the 1970s. The last grizzly bears were killed in Chihuahua in the 1960s, pretty recently, if you think about it. Imagine the kind of food source you have to have a grizzly bear. But also the otters and beavers were across the whole state. So all about the water, right? And this is the ranch when it rains. We have a big mountain range right inside the ranch. And when it snows. Yeah, some people think that Mexico is all tropical or desert, but no, we do have snow every year. So there's some places in Chihuahua that we have a lot of snow. Like this year past winter, we got a good snow event that throw a little bit of snow in my ranch, but on higher ground, like a meter of snow. So in my ranch, the temperature was like minus 10, and on those high range, it was like minus 25. So I'm not always wearing shorts, okay? And this is a rainfall pattern. It's a monsoon. We pretty much get most of the rain in summer, July, August, September. So those months really allow us to grow grass in such a way that we are trying to get a reserve or stockpiling for the next 18 months. Because we don't graze the same paddock, but every 18 months. We don't go to the same paddock, but every 18 months. So what happens when you do that during the spring? Or all spring, right? You have winter rains here, right? Okay. Well, on our spring, on the flash or monsoon, on that rapid growth, green up, the problem when you don't stockpile is that your cows or livestock are eating just green. So have you seen when they eat that green, they lose manure? We don't want to see that, folks. Because you're losing pounds and you're actually compromising the immune system because too much protein. So sometimes when you keep doing that, then you suddenly have pink eye problems. Pink eye has nothing to do with a seed or a fly. It's a compromised immune system where the animal is accumulating ammonia, and then you have that problem. How do we prevent that problem? Remember, your flag, green, gold, that's where we want to keep ourselves. That's a good diet. We don't want to have gray. Gray is an oxidized grass. Oxidized grass doesn't benefit anyone, but when we open the gate during that green up, then we are allowing the cow to select gold and green. So she can balance her diet. All green, immature, is not good. You following me? Good? Okay. That's one of the benefits of these long rest periods. The other benefit is that on a drought, even though your grass may not be at the optimal point, it's always cheaper for us ranchers to supplement animals with a rough, mature grass than no grass. Not having grass is expensive. And that's the main issue of American ranchers, because the cost of maintaining a cow in the US is pretty high. There's many years, 3 years ago, when the price of a winner was like $650, $700, and the cost of carrying a cow per year was $1,000. What is the point of telling them, oh, you can increase the stocking rate? Well, but I'm going to lose more money, right? So for me, it's very important first to reduce the inputs. to make your operation first profitable and then to increase. So first thing is how do we get rid of all the inputs? Then this is what I was telling you, the reality of our ranch is getting less and less rain. So before we got these big rainy years and then the droughts were like 8 inches. Now we have less rain in a rainy year and our droughts are like 4 inches, 3 inches. So we need to prepare the ranch for that new reality? No. Well, but at least you're gonna see I can explain that. Subtitle. So that is the desert we're dealing with, which used to be all grasslands. But then, well, not that I have bison, it's just an example, but then you're gonna see in some pictures, so this is the desert, and then you're gonna see that goes to my ranch, and then you're gonna see how we've been growing grasslands, where there used to be bare ground. Like now we're in our ranch. So our approach is actually obviously holistic management. We move the whole herd and they follow us because we move the herd twice a day nowadays. So we don't drive them, we don't herd them, we just open the gate, or if we need to move them, they follow you. So they trust you as the lead, of the herd, because they know that you want to take them to a better pasture. But we not only play that role, folks. We play 2 roles when we go with our cows to open the gate. Sometimes we want the cows to actually train the cows or control the cows in such a way that they're going to move when we tell them to move. But in the meantime, we look at the bottom of the herd. Because if you think about it, when you're going to deworm, vaccinate, get your pasture bigger, and so on, or supplement, who's making the decisions? Are the best cows making the decisions? No. Are the average cows making the decision? No. Is your poor performing cows actually influencing what you're gonna do? And it doesn't matter if you have 20% or 10% or 20 or 30% of the cows struggling, those cows are always making the decision what to do. Or sheep or horses or whatever you have. So that's why we act as predators and we keep calling the bottom. Because that way you're gonna make better decisions. You have to keep that as in the wild. You have to keep that herd clean. Whatever animal is gonna take extra time, he potentially is ready to leave the herd. Only there will be cows that is carrying a dinky calf, poor body condition, not such a shiny hair coat, or whatever issue, it gotta go. So, but we don't sell an animal. See, the advantage of calling like every month is that you're not waiting for that animal to get worse or even die, because nobody actually gets any money from a dead animal. There's only one good thing about a dead animal. It dies only once. So you don't suffer twice. But so we keep calling often, and we take those animals to a well-rested pasture, no high density anything. We let them select, and then once they get back on track, which is 99% of the time, then we sell them. We don't want to have animals in the corral. It costs. But try to keep your herd clean. I mean, you keep calling from the peers. You don't go to 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 body score. Who is not doing good at this time? And what happened nowadays is that now we're able to grow like 6 feet tall, 7 feet tall grasses at the ranch without putting that seed. We're not seeding anything. We just create the conditions. I remember this is like in a valley at the ranch in between 2 mountains. And the first time we apply like more intensive grazing, it came out with a lot of weeds. We call a weed, which is not the same as yours, pig weed, which is amaranthus. It's not like your pig weed. But usually that pig weed at the ranch grows like this much. Well, on that part of the ranch, for kilometers, it grows like, I was on my horse like this, and then this thick. And most of the grasses that I had there were dealing with salty soils because of the degradation. After we went through that, then we started growing better grasses because the land was actually prepared by these huge weeds, which we didn't really spray or anything like that. Imagine just the millions of seeds that were dropped because it took us a while to go back to that area and all that weed was already dry. So the cows were just trample that, but we never see that again. I mean, the seeds are there. Many people get concerned that, oh, if I don't get rid of the thistle, it's going to spread out. Well, it doesn't work that way, folks. It's the conditions you grow in the soil what's going to germinate. If you improve the conditions, nature's going to give you something different. The other important thing is that you always have to have some flexibility in your management. Our flexibility is the size of paddocks. For example, 2022, we got a good rains, 11 inches. So we ended up with 1,000 paddocks. 2023, 2024, we're in a drought, only 350 paddocks. So depending on what we see in front of us is the size of the paddock. How much acreage do we need for half a day? That's the question. Does it have a lot of green? It's smaller. It's in winter, a lot of gold, a little bit of green, bigger. They asked me, someone here in Australia 2 years ago, so what do you do in a drought? Do you leave more forage behind, more residual? And I told them, I don't, it's my cows leaving more residual. Because remember, you're always trying to balance the well-being, happy cows, with your grazing. Sometimes the year will allow you to graze more aggressive, and some more times you leave more behind because that's what the cow wants to do. I was going to ask you any questions, but no, let's keep going. So, for example, that's a pretty good part of the ranch, and with good grasses. So we have here like a polywire. So this used to be our winters. Remember the colors? Gold, green, and gray? Well, it was all gray. We're not feeding the wildlife. We were not feeding the macro herd, microbiology. We were not feeding our cows. We used to feed our cows for more than 6 months. Because Colin talked about mostly annuals, right? Few perennials. We used to have still some perennials, but those perennials were doing so poorly that they were behaving like if they were annuals. They only green up during the summer and they shut down again. They were in a survival mode, struggling. Then these are winters now. See how even the color changed, the diversity of species. That grass is mostly a grass that they call in the US vine mesquite. It's a round seed. It's really, really good for livestock, for birds, for wildlife. It's a perennial. Well, most of our grasses are warm season grasses. We have now 5% of our herd is composed of donkeys, but we're trying to get 10% because donkeys are like service crops or cover crops. It seems like, oh my God, that cover crop is taking water off my... No, it's giving you more water. So we believe that donkeys can actually do a lot of work that the cows were not designed by nature to do it. I mean, they can survive probably even on eating paper. So they do a lot of that, low quality forage. They help us do a more even grazing by not having to sacrifice the cows or the sheep or animals are more, they need better diet. So we work a lot with the bird conservancy organizations in the US because of the migratory birds go from Canada to Mexico. They fly over the wall. And the challenge here is that when we got these bird guides and they saw this plant, creosote, they say, oh, Alex, we have a really good product that is going to get rid of that creosote and it's going to allow you to grow grass. And I told them, no, if you come here to the ranch, you're not going to bring anything that kills. You bring something that promotes life. Because they say, it's an allelopathic effect. It does make sense, but I think what they are not taking into account is that we're going to bring the biology through the livestock, life. So what happened? We worked for what we wanted. Because, folks, many times we're working for what we don't want. We keep fighting and fighting and fighting. And look, the grass grow among the creosote. The good thing that the grass never read the books. Saying, oh, you cannot grow among the creosote. And then you change the name, you change the name to juniper, you change the name to sage, which is very dominant in central northern US. You see sage and nothing else. And people blame the sage for not having grass. I think we need to look at the mirror more often. So this is on the fence line. The green up is coming up in my side, and on the other side of my neighbor, still dormant. And what happened on the same spot in summer? So I was able to grow more grass in summer. Oh, there you go, here, than my neighbor. But one of the problems we have with institutions, organizations, government, nonprofits, is that they come here, they are helping you, so they have some right to say something, and they say, oh no, this is not working. You gotta lower the numbers. You need to destock. Well, it's more than destocking. Actually, I'm running 3 more cattle per acre than my neighbor. It's about how also you manage that livestock. If we have this magic and say, because I mostly work in the western US, which is similar to my ranch, and I say, suddenly all the ranchers now know how to do this in the western US. Let's do it. Let's regenerate the western US. You know what would be the first problem we would face? We don't have enough cattle. That's reality. We don't have enough cattle to regenerate. Even knowing what needs to be done, we don't have enough livestock. And reality is that in a lot of the western US, where it's desertifying, not different than Australia, right? It's because of the lack of animal impact. It's not anymore overgrazing. The oxidized grasses, grasses oxidize because they lack animal impact. For me, overgrazing is an animal staying too long on the same paddock or returning too soon. So the grasses haven't recovered. So I was driving to my ranch, and then you see the big difference. Same day, same precipitation, no irrigation. And then on the left side is one of my neighbors doing rotation, large pastures, not enough animal impact. On the right side is my ranch, more, smaller paddocks based on the time of the year and what you see that the cows needed for half a day. So it really does make a big difference. Then you have the natural succession, which also we as ranchers struggle. Because I tell ranchers, if you really make more animal impact, the first thing that you're gonna see is a bunch of weeds. Remember what Colin said about the gap between the grasses, that bare ground between the basal of the grasses? Well, that's gonna be filled first by weeds. We cannot skip that step. Because you cannot go from bare ground to 7 feet tall grasses. You have to respect the natural succession of annuals, weeds, thorny things, and then more annuals, short annuals, and then some short perennials, mid-sized perennials, in my context, right? Taller perennials, and so on. And that all ties back to the water cycle. Well, and then I forgot the most important thing, at least to me, and then forbs, or these flowering plants. Because I heard Christine Jones last year, we were in the same event. Do you know Christine Jones? Okay, she's incredible. And she said that North American grasslands were not grasslands, they were foreplants. And I strongly believe in what she said, because I don't want to be a grass farmer anymore. I think there's something beyond grasses which are forbs. They capture more carbon. If you really want to capture more carbon and improve the health and the pounds and the bees, we need forbs. Grasses don't produce flowers, but they do help us fix the water cycle. So this is just like a quick snap view of the plants, how they start going from all thorny, toxic, all the way through middle grasses, late grasses, and early wood plants. Some people ask me, are you going to end up with just grasslands? No. What happened is that the original trees actually going to take a while to get them back, and they're going to take a while to grow. Why? Because the trees really need a better water cycle. It's not that difficult to grow grass, but it's going to be way more difficult because nature's times are different than our times. That's where we actually struggle a little bit. And this is a good example because the bird guys, we call them the bird guys, the bird conservancy organizations, they're trying to protect that Aplomado falcon. But that Aplomado falcon happened to nest on that yucca on the right. So they're blaming us ranchers because they say that the cows are breaking that yucca. Well, that's far from the truth. What's going on is that yucca really was depending on the grasslands. See how that yucca is thriving just on that little piece of grassland? But obviously that land is just going downwards. So that yucca is going to die as well because the cows are going to overgraze that. Those particular areas, people don't move the cows. And then they're going to say, oh, a cow broke yucca. Because in the US, still, the thought is, if you want to preserve nature, we need to get rid of the livestock. We need to remove livestock. I'm going to pay you not to have livestock grazing there. So this is one of the few pictures that I took like in a succession with a reference point. So 2015, bare ground. 2018, weeds. 2021, perennial and annual grasses. So once you know what needs to be done and you're blessed with, I don't even asking for average rainfall. I can actually do really well with 6 inches. Before 8 inches, it was a drought because my soils were compacted. Do you know what's the major problem? Do you know where the most compacted soils are? Between our ears. And the major limitation of grass productivity is air in the soil. It's not water, folks. It's air in the soil. So how do we add air into the soil? Anyone have an idea how can we get more? roots. No, well, no, I'm just repeating what you said. I'm not saying roots, but yeah, we need living roots, right? We need a green plant feeding the microbiology. So one of the key things here is how can you extend the green season? Obviously, Colin said about diversity, right? Summer grasses, cool season grasses, warm season grasses, but also diversity of other plants. And then even the same plant, like my warm season grasses used to shut down, used to just live or hardly living on the monsoon. Now we have a little bit of green. Well, obviously when it's raining, lush, beautiful. When it stops raining, they keep going. They just turn gold, but at the bottom there's green. And that is so crucial, folks, that for us to have a little bit of green in the non-growing season, because it's going to keep the photosynthesis going, and the photosynthesis is going to keep feeding that microbiology, and that microbiology, especially the mycorrhizal fungi, is creating aggregation in the soil, and that's what's going to open the soils. Those marbles, that space between those loose marbles, is going to let us infiltrate, which Alan Severy called it effective rainfall. What is effective rainfall in Chihuahua or even Colorado? About 35%. We're wasting 2/3 of the rain. If we just increase that a little bit, wow. So yeah, it's microbiology, the one that is going to help us put air in the soil and make the rainfall more effective. We already mentioned that. It's a dynamic system. And you know, I'm encouraging ranchers to actually raise the bar. Because what I have seen in the US, but also in Australia, when you have buffalo, right? We have buffalo as well there. Buffalo grasses, the African grass, is that people manage for that grass. And we are encouraged by, you gotta keep that grass healthy, you know, keep the photosynthesis going. We don't take that approach because I don't want a monoculture of buffalo or 3 or 4 grasses or 10. I want to have 50, 100, or why not 200 different grasses. So we used to rotate the cattle 3 times in the same year, but it was when we extended to once a year or even once every 18 months that we were able to go from 20 grasses to 80 different grasses at the ranch. It's not that I counted the grass. I'm not a specialist on grasses. It's that the bird conservancy organizations are not only counting the birds, but once in a while, they're counting the grasses. So 10 years ago, I used to have 20 different grasses. Nowadays, I have more than 80 different grasses that they had never seen it before. So I want to have the kind of management that would allow me to have a lot of diversity. Because if I only manage for, let's say, buffalo, I'm not aware that I'm actually overgrazing the succession of new species, including forbs. Because I got a friend from, probably you know New, Colin? He went to my ranch, and he's in Kansas in a 40-inch area. And he told me, you know, Alex, I'm going to do a trial, because guys, we need to see our ranches as a labs. We need to do more experimentation. And if we work as a community, we're gonna make more progress. But this guy set aside a piece of his land, gave a full year of rest, and he found 3 new forbs. Probably he was overgrazing those forbs, or those flowering herbs. So when we say raising the bar, now it goes back to one of the very old verses from the Bible. The promised land of milk and honey. What do you need to get more milk from your cows? Fat, right? They need to be fat. So have you measured the breaks between a forb and a grass under the same conditions? Oh, the forb will beat easily the grass. More breaks, more sugars, more energy to produce more milk. How about honey? Same deal. Forbs are there to actually, for the bees, to produce more honey for everything. So how are we going to get more forbs? Well, first we need to lengthen the rest periods, but also grasses will help us fix the water cycle because to my knowledge, forbs need a better water cycle than grasses. That's why our best forbs grow among the grasses, like that one. That one is a pretty good forb for us, but you have to establish a good stance of grasses so you can actually get a better water cycle, and then you're gonna have the forbs. It's like nature rewarding you for a good job. This is how I would like to see my ranch, like full of life. It's like when you talk to a consumer. I mean, our senses still working okay. It's just that they manipulated the food to make us believe, oh, this is so tasty, this fast food or this trash food is so tasty. But in reality, we still have those senses really well developed. So my question is, okay, if you're going to see how good your farmer is doing, just use your senses. Does it smell good? Does it taste good? Does it feel good? Well, I told you why we had the donkeys. We see the donkeys as the service crop for the cows. And there's a study from Kenya that actually proved that running, because in Kenya the pastoralists were complaining about the zebras. So these guys from the US went there from the university, did the study, control is just cows, and then cows and donkeys. They couldn't use zebras. And cows did better running with donkeys in terms of pregnancy rates, in terms of daily gains, than just alone. That's why I call the donkeys the cover crops. So one indicator, folks. Look, these two grasses are the same species. And actually ask this grass PhD specialist, can you tell me what grass is on the left? Obviously I was kind of playing hardball. Oh, that's tobosa. How about the right? Oh, we have never seen that grass. It's the same, it's different management. The left one is on my neighbor, the right one is on my ranch. Why do we have more leaves on the right one? Because the microbiology is growing in its bigger panels, so your grasses are going to change its form to adapt to the population down under. Well, down under seems like we're here, right? See, that's one indicator you're gonna see. More leafy, less stems, more food for everybody, more goal. So I was able to pull that grass, which is a perennial on the left side, which is from the same picture, previous picture, with my hands. Shallow root system. Similar to Colin's picture, right? It's struggling, so it's so prone to drought. On the right side is a very deep root system that not even my donkeys will be able to pull it out. And then, have any of you used this tool to bricks, to measure bricks? Well, it's a useful tool to actually create a pretty practical baseline. In few words, we're trying to measure sugars or solids you can apply it on your grasslands. See what it does. As you increase the biology, you're gonna increase the bricks, and then you're gonna have a direct benefit on daily gains. Usually we're trying to get into the double digit of bricks. In the US, the average is 4 or 5 on kind of overgrazed pastures. But also, it will protect your plants from pests. They say that when you get to 20, which I don't see it on my ranch yet, it's like if you were giving corn to your animals. A lot of energy. High bricks. And what about the plants that we don't want? So we are managing those plants with our grasses. Our grasses are actually killing a lot of what we see like invasive plants. It's killing the creosote, it's killing the mesquite. Even bigger mesquites are going away. Why? Because we only work for what we want. Well, you don't have problems with fire, so we're gonna skip this, okay? But we have a big problem in the US, huge. It was terrible last year. So I think the approach to deal with fire is the wrong approach, because even people going with sheep or goats, the goal is to lower, the fuel. I think that's the wrong approach. I think we need to start talking about the water cycle. How can we fix the water cycle in order to prevent dry storms? And a dry storm is a storm where the soil is so hot that you got the thunders, you got the lightning, but you don't got the rain. There used to be a time when you got the lightning and the rain comes and it put it off. Now you got the lightning, and I consider fire as a way for nature to say, you're not doing a good job, let me reset this whole thing. Click. But why do we have problems with fires? Because our times are not the same as nature times. So there's a study from NASA that correlates the number of fires with the dryness of the soil, or the moisture. The drier the soil, the more fires. Let me tell you, evergreens or trees will not help. I mean, if someone believes here that, those trees are keeping like the temperature, we need grasslands below our forests. And at least to me, the only way for us to grow grasslands is through livestock. Livestock mimicking nature. So look at this. The left side, US forest protecting, or I would say overprotecting the forest. I already saw it here in the East Coast. What is this? State park. Full of trees, some of them dying because nature sends woody plants to trying to cover the soil when there's no grass. And then nature always also sends beetles for sick trees. And then you're creating a big bump. And this guy is grazing. I mean, it's very obvious which one is going to get a fire and what fire is going to be more destructive. So going back to Chihuahua, well, this was in Washington State. Going back to Chihuahua, we got a friend who's actually grazing on a very high elevation, like 2,400 meters in the state of Chihuahua. But look at what he's doing. He's growing grass among his forest. That's how we should look at the forest. And he's killing the junipers. Do you know how many millions are spent in the US fighting junipers? It's incredible in the whole western US. Look how he's killing all junipers. They have no place on a healthy forest. We just go for the symptom, but we are not actually working on the root of the problem. So this is an interesting picture because a friend of mine said, Alex, we cover the soil, this is in Texas, and then the neighbor is all bare ground, but he got all the snow. That's a bit unfair. Well, reality, folks, is when you have skin armor in the soil, grasses, you're cooling the soil in summer, but you're also warming the soil in winter. So he got more snow, but the snow melted much faster than on bare ground. That's what happened there. Well, I'm going to skip this. Obviously, there's a huge difference in temperatures on bare soil versus soil with armor. No words. If you don't like what it says there, call 1-800-Ray Archuleta. That he takes all the complaints. Then also, I want to tell you that we were at some point accredited to the UN. I think we still are, but we don't go to the meetings anymore. But there was a Germany delegation there. And I'm always promoting this, evangelizing. And they say, no, we don't want to talk to you. Why? Because it takes this many liters to produce 1 kilo of meat or beef. Well, I think we need to see it from a more holistic way. So what happened here in our property is that on bare ground, we are only able to infiltrate 2 inches of rain per hour. On land that we've been working for a few years with holistic management, we're able to infiltrate 18 inches. If we extrapolate the difference to our 30,000 acre ranch, we are going to be able to meet the water needs for a full year for 100,000 people. That's why it's so important, to consider the whole. So we have a way to say, okay, hold on. This is what happened. It's not that. The other thing is kind of very linear thinking. And then also some quite interesting things come up, like influencing the microclimate. Have anyone familiar with the Walter Jenny? No? Raise your hand who have heard about Walter Jenny. Okay, a few. Yeah, it's an incredible Australian scientist that talks about the larger water cycle, small water cycle. So we are responsible for about 40% of the water inland. The rest is coming from the sea. But if we don't have vegetation, if we don't have cover, we're losing. That's the part that we're losing. But for example, in our ranch, it's about 50% thick grasslands, and with that first 50%, we're able to change the microclimate, and I'm not the only one rancher doing this in Chihuahua. So we are experiencing about 10% more rain than the neighboring ranches. Obviously, the neighbors get the benefit sometimes, or sometimes they tell you, oh, it rained only along the fence. What happened? It's not only the effective rainfall, it's also that we can create a microclimate. In my ranch, in summer, I'm about 5 degrees cooler than my neighbors. You can feel it. You can see that mist, that dew in the morning. In the desert, think about that. So what else are we doing there? How about the soil engineers? What do you think about this cow pie? I mean, it has a nice shape, but it's still there. It's gray. We don't like gray. So these guys are using ivermectin, are killing the life. So we do selection and culling to get cows adapted or livestock adapted to our management and our context. That's how we want to see our cow pies. The more you actually fix the water cycle, the more activity you're going to have of dung beetles and termites. And I don't know how you call this in Australia, roly-poly, those insects that, roly-poly? Yeah. And mushrooms. It's pretty incredible what comes out out of a cow pie when you don't kill them and when you fix the water cycle. So look at the side view of dung beetles. It's pretty impressive the work that they do. Plus, they could potentially reduce the fly population by 90%. Well, that used to be a cow pie, and then you start having more dung beetle species. And then the termites are also another one that I relate to donkeys, because you have the cow pie and it is work with dung beetles, and then the termites come and finish the work. They just leave like dust. These little pieces of stems, they just even take them and put into the soil. Even look at how smart nature is. If I had sprayed this mesquite, as many people in the US does, then I wouldn't have this cycle. So this cycle, the mesquite is getting weak, then it's a beetle, not a dung beetle, but a beetle pruning the branches fall, and then another different termites came here and put all this dead material into the soil. So you may be wondering, oh, but this is a legume. Who's putting the nitrogen? Well, the termites put a lot of nitrogen in the soil. So now you change from a tree to an insect. And even termites are taking dead gray grass and converted into nitrogen in the soil. So another thing that is happening is we are able to rewild the place. Look at all the animals that we are seeing now, like growing. Mule deer and all natives like golden eagles, gray foxes, and so on. So we need to understand that the livestock or cows are not from another planet. They are part of the ecosystem, and if we manage them in sync with nature, we're going to be helping to rewild. And then the bird guys put a monitor antenna modus. You can actually search our ranch, Las Damas, with this tracking, and then you'll see that a lot of birds are going to our ranch to nest in winter. So now we have a more scientific way to prove that what is good for the cows is good for the birds. Because we're having this guy coming to the ranch, which is in danger. And this is listed. And this is, well, I'm not sure. I don't think that video is gonna, but well, this is a video that actually shows like how we've been able to grow our grasslands where there used to be bare ground, but it didn't work. So just a brief summary to finish this. So you can actually read it. But the foundation of this kind of management in dry lands is the water system. We use wells, we use pipe, we use troughs, we use solar systems. We used to use windmills, and we migrated to diesel generators, and now we all have solars. If we need more water, we don't have batteries, we just have a generator that we can connect. And then we have a 2-inch pipe, 3-inch pipe. The submersible pump is sized in such a way that it can get the water out, because our wells are, well, you call them bores, right? So our bores are like 400 feet in average, 500 feet deep. So we take the water out and put it into a water tank, because you know we have a lot of hills and mountain range, so we can put a water tank at the top, and then we gravity fed to the cows. And then we have a lot of paddocks, and we try to remember the cattle business is a simple business. The most difficult part is to keep it simple. So how do we keep it simple? Many people ask me, oh, so how many people do you have there? Well, I have my foreman and I have a cowboy. That's it. Because even though labor in Mexico may be cheaper, we don't want to waste resources. I mean, in a normal day, with no water issues, they can go. We usually move late during the day because we want the breaks to go up, and then we move the cows. The only time of the year that we actually move the cows early is when they are calving, because we want to make sure that they are paired when we move them. But it's not that we move them, we just open the gate and we let them move the calf. We try to keep just one herd. Obviously, we have the bulls in another herd, and we have the colts in our herd. But we try to put everything together. Mares, saddle horses we're not using, donkeys, all the livestock, everything just one herd. I mean, we used to ride like for 8 days, 10 days, trying to see all the cattle. Now when my dad goes there and we go at 10, and then at 11 we already saw all the cattle, and then my dad asks, so what else is gonna be doing? I don't know, whatever you want. Where do you see all the cows? Remember I told you about this ongoing selection and culling? We keep culling the bottom constantly. But also we promote the bulls from within the herd, from the best cows, so we get the genetics back. And I know some Australians are pretty concerned about us having a closed herd or almost closed herd. That's probably one of the few ways we have found to get rid of all the problems and to get cattle adapted, and cattle that can actually, livestock, that can help us. Because livestock should help you regenerate the land. It's like the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the cows give you 80% of the problems, so you better reduce that 20%. so you have less problems. I was telling you, we raise our own bulls mostly. We're still buying from a few breeders that we trust. Because one thing you need to keep in mind is that most problems we have as ranchers is based on just two things, nutrition and genetics. How we improve nutrition? Well, grazing management. How improve the genetics? Selection and culling. We calve during the growing season, which this is interesting because we used to calve during the rainy season because that was the only growing season we had. And then we started extending the green season towards spring. And now we can calve in the spring, which is much better. Because now when we are going to be hit by the winter, the calves are grown up and they don't demand much from the cow. See your ranch as a lab. And I think there's another one that didn't show up there, which is hang out with like-minded people. This is my dad. He's 92 years old. When my mentor, Jesus Almeida, old-timer holistic management practitioner, which I was really lucky to land in Chihuahua, the land of wild dogs, because I have probably one of the best holistic management practitioners in whole Mexico. And he not only became the first guy that gave me a course, but he became a friend. So when he went to my ranch, he told me, Alex, it was just like a bare ground, and he said, you're thinking of having more cows, you're thinking of having more grass, you're thinking of keeping more money in your pocket, but you haven't thought about something. What you're doing is going to give more years of life to your dad. So it's been 20 years, and my dad is so excited as ever before because he always been passionate about the ranch. And folks, I believe we were born to see beautiful things. We were not born to see fires or to see droughts or dust storms or flooding. And what we do actually prevents all that stuff. Thank you.
Shut that paddock off and you're just letting it do its thing. How do you keep the fire risk down? So generally we like our paddocks to be short. Can you slash or roll, or do you just have to leave it and hope you don't have a fire?
Yeah, you certainly don't want to have a fire, but the transition period in anything can be tricky and difficult, and we need to work through that. And in my opinion, we definitely don't need to burn ourselves out. But having experienced that myself, the reason I got burnt out at home. So this is sort of indirectly answering your question. 1979 we had a major fire and we lost 3,000 sheep in that and houses and the whole lot, which is why I changed. But the reason we got burnt out is that what we're just talking about. All that we had at home, this was mostly in my father's era, that we had all C3 cool season grasses, ryegrass, clovers, all of those. All of the summer grasses had over the years had either been ploughed or overgrazed, mostly ploughed in our case, or killed with cropping. So we got burnt out because we had all C3 grasses. So the long-term answer to that is to try to get more and more of those green growing summer ones in there. And I guess fire breaks and things like that can be an important thing. Grazing would be like if you're grazing in a form of rotation, use your larger mobs of animals to selectively manage those areas to protect your house and buildings.
Yeah, I'm more in the transition period where you're giving that paddock a year off, when you're very first starting to try and introduce those C4 grasses.
Yeah, and I feel that we're kind of navigating in a big ship, and then suddenly we thought that, wow, now we are regenerative farmers or ranchers. But that doesn't mean that the land is regenerative yet.
Yeah.
So we call those first years like misery years.
Yeah.
You know, because you're still not in such a great shape.
Yeah.
But as Colin said, we're all about perennial grasses. I mean, we're dominated by one season grasses where we are.
Yeah.
Why perennial grasses? Because I know you have seen firsthand big fire, like after all the burn. Where there's water, it didn't burn. So for me, it's all about how our grasses are going to fix the water cycle so we can actually prevent a fire by fixing the water cycle, not by removing all the old material, but by fixing the water cycle. Yep.
I'll just add a bit to that. Just reminded me about, this is not the 1979 fire, but about 10 years ago, we had another fire came into the property. My neighbour lost a lot of sheep in it. And then came into the property at home and started to burn. It burnt into it. It went in 200 or 300 metres or more, and then slowly died down. And this was in February. It slowly started to die down, and then it started going out. By the time the fire brigades, everyone got there, the fire had almost gone out. And that was because we had green summer grasses in there. However, there's always a point, like we have more fire danger now in the autumn when these warm season grasses are going into winter dormancy. But then the nights are cooler and it's not going to be a raging huge fire at that stage. So there can be a problem at that stage, but it won't be as bad as January or February or something.
Thank you.
Yep.
Grazing that, sorry, Sam from Mount Pleasant,
Yeah.
on the road from Kersbrook. Drier than Kersbrook though. Grazing management, I think the last 4 or 5 years our springs have been non-existent and it's been very hard to manage not overgrazed paddocks.
Yeah.
So either selling off stock or more and more people now going to confinement feeding.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried confinement feeding? Are there any pros and cons? Is that the solution? Managing to stop pressure?
I have seen people send themselves broke with confinement feeding, the same as feeding in the paddock. So I'm not a big fan of it at all. I know that the Victorian Department of Ag or government departments promoted a confinement feeding right through Victoria. And gee, a lot of people still spend huge amounts of money keeping their animals locked up and feeding them. Okay, you're getting your animals off the property, so it is better. But gee, I think what I did, we got 3 years in a row at home, really got serious drought, a bit like the one here, worst we've ever experienced. But what I did at home, I started selling before with a grazing rotation. You know, before with a good one, long plant recovery time, you know a long way out whether you're starting to run out of feed. So what we did was we start selling animals, and I start by selling the old ones and ugly ones. So but I kept a core breeding mob. I cut it down to under half. But because we had good grassland, the first year was no problem. We just kept rotation going. Second year was a bit tighter. The third one it was a bit tight. It was tight, but by then we didn't have a lot of animals on. I'm sure Alejandro will have a good answer for that one.
Well, I'm with a different thought because I like that. How you call that, feeding on the containment feeding.
Yeah.
As long as it's not my cattle, right? as long as I don't pay for it. No, reality. I mean, we try to avoid any animal on the pens, on the corrals.
Yeah.
I think I'm in sync with Colin saying that kind of a little bit reflects like we miscalculated because there's always such an important part of the year where you're not gonna have more grass growing. For us would be fall, and that's when you actually have to estimate what's your capacity and your stocking rate. And we had become very conservative, saying, okay, right now I would like to have 2 years of grass, even if I just get like 100 millimeters or 50 millimeters, I still can going on, even probably with a little bit of supplementation, still going on without the stocking. That's where I am. I don't want to, and it's not that I'm kind of setting aside it's just like these long rest periods. Actually, you always have something on the back that is growing, or it's already like stockpile. But I think the important thing is, okay, as Colin said, the first year it didn't rain again, then you have to stock. Because once you put the animals on the pen, it's gonna cost you. So we're always trying to be a low-cost producer. So if you get less money for your cattle, you'll still make profit. If you get more money, you make more profit. At the end of the day, really what counts is how much money is left in your pocket. Because usually at that time, when everybody is putting cattle on the pens or the corrals, everything is very expensive. And then usually also the prices go down because everybody's selling. So remember that those stress times are times for you to improve. I mean, for you to say, okay, how was my water system? Because droughts usually start with the lack of water, right? And then the lack of grass. But then, was it my system as robust and reliable as I thought? And that would be a good lesson learned when you're facing a drought, because it will tell you, okay, your water system was not that good, and it's gonna cost you money. Or you didn't set aside enough, or you didn't destock at the right time, and it's gonna cost you money. So once it's costing us money, then, money really goes fast when you're trying to feed your cattle. So instead of wasting the money there, then let's invest in something that is gonna give us better return.
Yep. I just add a little bit. The carting water for stock, even sheep, but even worse cattle, is an endless futile game. You'll never cart enough water for them. So to add to what you said, make sure you've got a really good, reliable water system.
Yeah, and one comment I have about water is, like, people complain saying, oh, I should have put, like, instead of 1 1/4, a 2-inch pipe. Oh, I should have built a bigger water tank. Oh, I should have a bigger pump. But I have never met anyone complaining about getting such a big thing, like a larger thing, something like that.
Yep. The question up the back there somewhere was,
Okay.
If there's one thing you would like to give people in this room any advice when they go home, what, in your opinion, is the first thing they should be doing?
Yeah, you keep.
No, you. I'm getting used to that. So you make.
The first thing they should do, go to a holistic grazing management course. Is the first place they should start, really. Yeah, we're giving you enough information today to make yourself dangerous to yourself. So go and do a proper good holistic grazing management course. It'd be the first thing. It's interesting. My grandson just started left school, started working at home, and the first thing I did was booked him into a grazing management course, and he loved it. He was the youngest one there by a long way. He was only 16.
Wow.
And that's the first thing I did. That was one of Brian Welberg's courses, holistic management courses.
Yes, I agree. I think it's education. I mean, my background is computer science. Because when I was going to start my college, I asked my dad, so should I study something on animal science? No, study whatever you want, but nothing related to the ranch. So at that time, the computers were like a black box, and I said, well, I want to know how they work. So I spent 15 years working as a software engineer, a little bit in Mexico, most of it in the US and other countries. So my point there is that, yeah, it's education, because you think that, I mean, we are living like the knowledge ranching era, you know, that is all about the know-how. Even though you may even not have a property, but if you have the know-how, then you're far ahead of many ranchers. Yeah. Because I feel that there will be great opportunities or a lot of properties transitioning, and then the guys who know how to do it can get a lot of potential opportunities. So first is education, and then also talk to, my dad has a saying, talk to the guy who knows and play with the guy with money. So, well, in this case, is talk to the guys who actually you say, wow, I want to be like that guy, and visit the ranches. Just don't like go and visit the ranch, go and get education, because in our case, we've been getting, obviously the foundation was laid out by Alan Severy, but we keep getting ourselves like exposed, and I'm learning today from Colin, and I keep learning from Gabe and from others. Yeah. So we have to be very curious and keep learning and be humble enough to actually say, wow, I never heard that. That's pretty cool. Let's get it. And well, the second thing now, talking about capital investment, would be water. I mean, water is the foundation. We always say in our context that you're going to have as many cattle as you have water. I mean, well, obviously on a certain scale, but yep.
And the reason partly why that's important, apparently a lot of people now have run out of water here, and that's on national news, which mightn't be true. So, but yeah, water's absolutely critical. Yeah.
And if you're going to put something of quality, it has to be in the water. Some owners ask me, so how many cattle can a cowboy handle? Well, it really depends. If they're going to be struggling with water, then I don't know, probably you're going to have one guy just taking for the water, take care. Yeah. But if you have a robust, reliable water system, where we always tell ranchers, what is your plan B and what is your plan C for water? Because probably we all that own cattle, we have experienced that terrible moment where the cattle are just right on the trough, fighting for water. And remember, when you have a problem with, it's all about flow rate. It's not more about having a big trough, it's about flow rate, saying that cattle can wait for their turn as long as when they are next, there's still water up. Because if you don't have that and the water starts going down because of the lack of flow rate, then you have to go and look for the weakest link, and the weakest link is the calves. Because let's say that bulls and then open cows and then pairs, so when that cow goes and get a drink, then and the water goes down, the calf will not be able to drink. And then the cow leaves, and the calf leaves with the dam without drinking water. So when you have issue with water, it's going to be reflecting on the weakest animals of the herd.
Yep. Good.
Susie Gordon, Mount Pleasant as well. Do either of you cut hay? So we're talking about the green and the gold. So we have a lush period, say in October, when we hopefully had some rain, and it's all very green and lush and quite full of moisture. And I'm just wondering, you were talking about the green and gold. Do you cut hay over New Mexico, or like when you have your lush green period?
Well, you keep it. The question here, I just repeat it out.
Yeah.
Question is, do we cut hay? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Do we cut hay? Okay. Yep.
Yeah, we personally don't cut hay. What's happened is that when the grass is growing, that it hasn't reached a bud stage, meaning it's forming the seed. It's still probably too much protein and not much energy. So that's when the stockpiling really help us. Even if you just have one kind of grass, but you have stockpile, and then when the grass is growing, then you're allowing the cow to select gold and green. But once the grass reaches that the bud stage, you don't really need that gold, because now nature's saying, okay, you don't need the gold is going to be integrated into the soil, and then they can actually graze with no problem all the green stuff. But I don't know if you're saying that we may be cutting or making like bales or something to balance the diet, or for periods that you don't have grass. No, I mean, I think what's going on at the ranch is that nature knows exactly what it needs to do if we stockpile grasses. Because I remember a time where we have tons of gold, and then suddenly, well, they green up, and then, wow, the gold just disappeared. I mean, and we never experienced that in the desert. So we start walking through the pastures, and the gold was on the soil. Yeah, so nature determined you don't need that gold anymore. It's going to be back to the soil. And then the grass that I'm providing you at this stage is enough for your cows to do well.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we should be cutting hay. I actually haven't for 40 years. If we manage well and get our grasslands or grasses right, it's a far better way to go. But also, cutting hay is one of the worst things we can do for our farms. And if you're doubting that, have a look at a paddock that's had half the paddock cut for hay and then removed, and the other half is left as grass. The next year, that where the hay's been removed will be very ordinary. So cutting hay, and especially selling it, but even cutting it, is one of the worst things that we do. If you have to use hay, you really have to in that transition, which might be possible, buy it off someone else and let them stuff their farm. I mean, really. It's very expensive to make it. Better off to buy it, and then at least you're bringing in nutrients. You're not exporting them. Yeah.
So you don't slash or anything at all?
No, yeah, use the animals. Yeah, use the animals for slashing. They got 4 legs and mouths. And if someone invented a cow that was a mower, mulcher, and fertiliser all in one, you'd get millions of dollars for it. But it's already been invented, and it's called a cow. So we don't need slashes and mulches and stuff. You don't put diesel in it.
There was a question on the...
Oh yeah, there was one up there, yeah.
Carol Bailey from Macclesfield Springs. Look, I've never seen a season like the last 2 years in my life. That makes it a once in 80-year event. Now, it's easier if you're trading cattle or sheep or whatever to destock almost down to nothing and then buy in again. If your herd, as ours does, represents 45 years of selective breeding, you can't replace those animals. So you get down to the best cows you've got. Yeah. It's made more difficult by the fact that a very unwise government has now slapped not only housing development but intensive horticulture and agriculture right up against farmland and grazing areas. This has reduced the water table down to nothing, and also the very smart councils for the last decade have been collecting all the water and exporting it. So the water tables have got nothing in them, the gum trees are dying. As you drive around here, all the way right through South Australia, you're going to find gum trees dying. This is because the water tables are so reduced. It's as bad at Melrose and the Flinders Ranges as it is at Narracor. I've just been through there recently. It's all the same all the way to Geelong in Victoria. Polo Bay is on level 3 water restrictions, and yet our government here doesn't even recognise it. They're too busy bringing in more people and creating more housing. So, they're creating a problem of housing shortage by bringing in more people. So this is having a terrific impact on any food producer, whether you be cropping, whether you're growing barley for beer, whether you're growing food for cattle or for people. It's probably something to turn the damn government on, as far as I can see.
Yeah. To get the first part of your question there, like about keeping what you do, just correct me if I got this wrong. What happens when you start destocking? When you've got a closed herd or a well-bred? Yep. Now I run a merino stud at home, and that's been going for 75 years. I'm not going to sell the last of my ewes, and I didn't in that 3-year drought that we had. But I culled them right back to that core, and then what we did then after that drought broke, we had enough in our case ewes to breed back in. We didn't buy anything in. We double lambed them, which you can do with sheep, autumn and spring lambing, and we bred them back up really quite quickly. So you don't have to. We're not talking about selling every last one if you've got animals that you value or for whatever reason you think are irreplaceable. They probably are replaceable. So that one, but I'm not talking about selling everything. Some people do, but they're people that generally are running steers or just non-breeding stock. One way of doing it is if you're trading. A person told me this. If you're trading animals, you're buying and selling animals, just buy ugly ones, and that way you're quite happy then to sell them when it gets dry.
All my animals are ugly, probably.
Yeah.
No, what I have seen is that actually a lot of people doing holistic management, all practitioners, they have good genetics.
Yeah.
So in a drought, they just drastically reduce, but they always keep the core.
Yeah.
And then either renting or feeding, but they always keep the core and then rebuild again. Now, let's say that you have a lot of grass. Sometimes they split the property in two, keep the core one half, on the other they bring stalkers or they rent to someone else.
Yeah.
But the management is still there. I mean, they are not allowed to manage the way they went. We will manage, or they will manage in a holistic grazing management way. Yep. Yeah. But I feel, that you need to care for those genetics because nobody's going to sell you those genetics.
Yeah.
Even if it is the same property, it is your management, is their management, even if it is exactly the same. Yeah. We can call it maturity level or whatever. Yeah. Yes?
I'm Alex from Colin Valley, which is only about 10 k's as a crow flies. 18-inch rainfall average. You said, Colin, you said not to sow pastures. I would like to establish pastures with perennials and things, and I'd like to sow them this year to get them established quickly, but you said that you didn't advise that. Why is that?
Okay. I'll just repeat the question. Do we or don't we sow pastures? Is that fair enough question?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Now, it totally depends. If you change, usually what we can do if we change our grazing and have really good grazing management, the type of what we're talking about, we can stimulate what is there and restore our pastures by not sowing anything at all. Now, so that's the first thing we should do and try. But in areas where there's either been a lot of cropping or in older areas, which this area is here, it's been established for a long time, 1830s or something. So it's been managed usually fairly poorly in those early days, flogged to death with sheep, and a lot of this area would have been ploughed early days. So there's not a lot of there's not a lot of seed left in these areas. Now, if there isn't any seed in the soil from say our native grassland species, there's not a lot of chance of trying to stimulate those seed to grow. There's not enough seed there of good grassland species. So in that situation, we can sow a pasture, but what I was talking about today also was our pasture should function like the grassland used to function, where we have great diversity. We're going to sow it, don't sow 1 or 2, sow 8 or 10 or 15 species in there. That's really what I was talking about. But try the grazing first. If we can fix it with grazing on its own, that's great. Doesn't cost anything much at all, only changing your head. So that was where I was coming from. Did that answer Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
I'm just know how to grow grass from a seed bank, but my point here is when we used to do a lot of the open gate, like we brought people to the ranch, like whoever locally wanted to go. And I remember walking through those 7 feet tall grasses. Green Sprangletop is the name in English, because it's also in the southern US. And one guy was getting seed from it, put it in his pocket. And as I was joking, saying, because we Mexicans are kind of similar to you, that we like to tease. I told him, oh, that seed is pretty costly. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. I said, no, don't worry. I mean, it was there. But my point is that if that guy believed that just growing the seed and putting the seed on his ranch is going to work that way, it will not. Yeah. Because before those grasses grew up there, it got to be this process, of a lot of weeds and certain weeds and another kind of weeds and the annuals and the perennials until we got to that point. So for me, it's more important for you to create the right conditions, and then let nature take over, and then see after that if you really need to plant something else. Yeah. Maybe at that point you say, well, I'm okay with that, let's keep going this way. It's maybe you're having to be more patient, but probably you're gonna have, it's gonna be less expensive in the long term. The grassland at home that is there now, and there's 60 species in it now, but so I'm still short. It needs to get to 200 or 300 from what it was originally. But I haven't sown any of those. A lot of people think that I've actually sown that, but no, I did it. I restored the grassland through management of the types of things we're talking about today, and it had been ploughed and farmed. From the 1920s at least. So you wouldn't have thought there was anything there, but there was. So often there's more seed species in the soil than we think. But as Alejandro said, we need to create the right conditions for those to germinate. Like they've sat there for 100 years and haven't germinated. Why? Because it's usually because the soil is now that hostile toward them. These are perennial plants. Perennial plants, I don't get off track here, perennial plants almost seem to be an intelligent creature. and I'm only half joking here, but annual plants are fairly stupid. They'll grow at any time. And because all their goal in life is to grow and produce enough seed so they'll grow next year. Perennials, if there's a perennial seed in the ground, it generally only has one chance at it. So it seems to just sit there until the conditions are right. Now, really good grazing management that we're talking about will stimulate the germination of those perennial species. The other way of doing it, which I did find totally accidentally, was the pasture cropping methods that I developed, and especially sowing oats, virtually no fertiliser and no pesticides. Now that oats with root exudates, I hope I don't get too far off track here, root exudates restored the soil ecosystem around the plant roots,
and created the conditions for those seeds that have sat there for 50 years or more to now germinate. That's primarily how I did it at home, a combination of that and grazing management. And where I first saw this happening at home was I could see these little plants grew coming up in the drill line. I was zero tilling in the drill line where we sowed the oats, and so there was rows. And this has happened pretty well anywhere there's been some research work and trial work done with these methods. We can stimulate the germination of seed that's laying dormant in the soil. But you've got to overlay that with really good grazing management as well. So a combination of the two, really. I hope that wasn't too far off track. But we've run out of questions. Surely not. You know.
Why are you asking me?
Hang on, we've got some over here that haven't asked a question yet. Sorry. Yep.
As far as soil biology, there's a couple of things. Do you use any biostimulants when you're actually seeding or you're trying to develop?
Hang on, just say that again.
Sorry, it's Dig from Springton and just up the road.
Yep.
Is there a place for biostimulants, just trying to kick off the soil biology to actually help with regenerating pasture?
You're talking about a product. I'm not too sure. Does any?
If you're using vermicast or anything like that when you're seeding.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Are you talking about something we can put on which will stimulate microbiology? Is that? Okay. Okay. There's quite a lot of products out there like that, which some would be okay. The best microbial food on the planet, the absolute best, are plant root exudates. So, I'll just elaborate on that a bit. Why multi-species work, either in a multi-species like crop we're talking about, or a multi-species grassland or pasture, is that each one of those plant species produces a different range of root exudates, which feeds a different range of soil microbes. Now, if we have one plant growing there, all it does is feed one type of microbe. But if we have 10, 20 or 300 in there, then we're almost turbocharging the whole system. We're feeding a huge range of microbes then. So some of these products may be okay, but the best thing you can do is to have as much plant diversity as you possibly can. Then you'll start to change everything. And because I've been involved in this space for a long time, I was recording things really early and had research organisations at home to verify it. And not only myself, but but other people were reporting what was happening. This is early days, real early days. We were seeing things happen that shouldn't happen. And this will happen on your places as well if we're starting from a low base, as it was at home. We were seeing things that should not happen, and we're getting growth, and new plants turn up, and no one could answer it. The scientists couldn't answer it, and we were getting in arguments. I reckon we were fudging the figures on all this stuff and lying about stuff from scientists. But what happened is that no one understood what I just said about the more plant species we have in there, the more we drive it over a vast area. We start to feed a vast range of soil microbes and great diversity, and that drives the change. And that's the key to it. That's why I keep rabbiting on about plant diversity. Plant diversity is the key because of that microbial connection and restoring the soil ecosystem side of things. That's what drives a lot.
Well, remember the example that we show with the agave? Well, yeah, we put biostimulants, but they were coming from the gut of the livestock.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many times we talk about diversity of plants, but we also like to talk about diversity of livestock.
Yeah.
So that guy started grazing there, no biostimulants. I mean, it was a pretty bad soil because of the chemicals that they were putting. Probably, this natural succession. but it was all those tools that the livestock provide us, manure, urine, saliva, hoof action, even the breathing promotes growth. So it's all that exchange of microbiology that comes from the gut of the livestock, and that's all that's all we apply there. We did have the time to go through, but there's many examples of friend of ours buying, because Chihuahua has like a lot of contrasts, like deserts and then grasslands and then pine forests and then sand dunes. So I got a friend who had a similar ranch to mine, but he went to buy land from the sand dunes of Chihuahua, the pure deserts, like the one you have in Central Australia. And he's growing grass there. He didn't plant anything. He just used his cows from his ranch, and then he moved all of his cows for only 3 months, because the drier it is, the longer the rest periods you need. So he just grazing, move all the herd, he put a little bit of hay, and he grazed for 3 months the whole property. And now after 2 years, wow, you're seeing these grasses coming up. Yeah. Where was the seed? It's all pure sand. I don't know, but it's there. And then you not necessarily have to have a seed bank, which probably is the majority of the times, but if you create the conditions, then you're talking about wind, water, livestock, wildlife, birds, all carry a lot of seeds.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Talking about increasing biodiversity with your grasses and pools and things, I'm wondering about what your thoughts are about encouraging locally native forage trees and shrubs as part of your system.
Yeah, okay. We should never forget the shrubs and shrub layers in our grassland. It's part of it. And some of the grazing shrubs are very valuable. There was a project in West Australia that would have been 15 years ago that was looking at the West Australian shrubs and as well, and it was great work. So obviously saltbush, being the obvious one that stands out, but I think that's a good idea, especially in the South Australian grasslands. It looks as though there was a lot of shrubs and forbs and especially shrub layers. So I think that it's a really good idea to concentrate on that. It's not only about grasslands, it's about what was in those grasslands as well, which was shrub layers and that as well. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, what we have seen in our ranch is that, grasses are actually removing some of the, we call it like chaparral, like all these bushes and things like that. But it's taking longer for the original ones to come up, because the original trees and woody plants that we had there, they were able to get a symbiosis with the grasses, and they were able to deal with probably a different fungi to bacteria ratio or even more moisture in the soil. And we have a few of them, but they're like in how you call it, ponds or, like where there's still a lot of moisture. But it's going to take longer for that. We're just going like the slow route. But they're going to come up. Just waiting for them to. We're still seeing a little bit of it, but growing grass is quite a little bit quicker, but then growing the original woody plants is going to take longer.
Yeah. Yep.
My name is Sharon. I'm from Macclesfield Springs. I've got sheep, cattle, a couple of alpacas. We had 312 mils of rainnuts. Going forward, and my neighbour next door, Kate, she couldn't be here today. What can we do going forward to make sure our pastures are in a good place when the rains do maybe eventually return? Is there anything we need to do, or just lessen the stocking pressure?
Hang on, just repeat the last part of that question.
What can we do? Like at the moment, drought, and there's not much coverage on the ground. Is there anything we can
Okay, yep. What happens for now?
Well, you know, when we go and visit a ranch that hasn't done anything, regardless whether it's raining or it's not raining, we ask them to show us the best pastures. But because I can tell you, I did it the other way. Because we as humans, we try to fix what is broken. So we have the tendency to go and look for the ugliest part and work there. And if you think about that approach, which is pretty like a no-brainer, I feel it's the wrong approach. Because then you're going to the worst place, and you know, we all have partners, right? Either your wife or your kids or your partner or someone else. And we want to get results as fast as possible. So if you see it as a return on investment, while lowering the risk, which is different than, you know, because a traditional investment, the more risk you take, probably better the return. Here, it doesn't have to be that way. So for example, I go to a ranch, I went to a ranch in Colorado, and I asked them, the short prairie, they call it short prairie, so show me your best pasture. So they showed me the Cadillac. They have a name for that pasture, the Cadillac pasture. And I told them, you're going to start here. And they understand why, because I explained them why. You know, why am I starting on the best pasture? On where you have, it's probably closer to where you are. Maybe you don't have to drive much. Probably you drive every day, so you're seeing the results. It has a little more extra moisture because probably it's running water from another place there. It has more diversity, more biomass. And because many times when you go to a place, people are wondering, what should I do tomorrow? So that is the homework. I mean, I don't want people to develop anything yet, just to convince themselves that this works. As Rowena explained, you know, like we already have a water there, so just give me 1/3, let's say, of the Cadillac pasture. So if that pasture traditionally lasted for 30 days on the growing season, I don't want you to change the time that you get in and out. I don't want you to change the diet of the cows. I just want you to intensify the grazing, like no back fence from the water. Let's say that pasture you were taking 30 days. Just whatever you're doing, it was taking 30 days to finish that pasture. Well, I want you to give me 10 days. And then daily moves, no back fence. And then after that, because most people are all in the Western US are grazing multiple times per year. So the homework is, obviously you have to train the cattle to respect electric fence, but the homework is, okay, divide it into 10 paddocks, no back fence, graze it, then keep doing whatever you were doing. But then set aside that for a full year. So you're getting back again, don't touch that. And that has been many times enough for ranchers to say, okay, yeah, I like what I'm seeing. And what do they have to see? More diversity, and then probably darker, greener, or extending the green season. And that, so we tell people, okay, once you're convinced that this is better for you, then go from the best to the worst. And so many times the worst means like you have to invest more money to make it work, or it's more degraded. Yeah. So well, that will be my answer. It doesn't matter. Obviously, it's always easier, at least to our experience, to start with something green, you know, like in the growing season or the rainy season. Well, it doesn't rain grass, so you can wait a little bit. But yeah, that is kind of the homework that we give to a client, you know, that hasn't never been exposed or a little bit. But it's a combination of I mean, you're increasing big time the density. Is that they're gonna size the paddock for 1 day. And then obviously, if they're moving, let's say in the mornings, they have to go in the afternoon to see what's going on, right? There will be some stress on the livestock, but then is that more intentional, more animal impact combined with a long rest period in a good pasture that they will say, well, I like them, so let's keep going.
Yep, I think that's probably answered it. Okay, any more questions? There must be. Yep.
Waterlogged pastures. Will this system improve the waterlogged pastures fairly quickly?
Waterlogged pastures and extremely dry pastures are created by the same thing, surprisingly. Mm-hmm. So Yes, yeah, we can. We can fix it, waterlogged pastures. And usually it's because there is a compaction layer, often almost like a perched water table, from ploughing from years ago, you've got a compaction layer. So growing perennial grasses will fix those compaction layers. So they're interrelated. Extremely dry, hard country is often the same reason why another an area is waterlogged.
Yeah, I mean, we had the same questions. I visited a client on the Sandhills of Nebraska, and yeah, he told me that he was a great grazer. I mean, I was wondering, what am I doing there, right?
Yeah.
It's this beautiful grassland with forbs. But he told me that when he was a kid, they used to make hay on the bottom parts of those sandhills. Now, the water was there year-round. So it was a compaction. I mean, once we understand, and sometimes all what you need is a shovel to just look at the root system going sideways. Because remember what we said early on, the air in the soil. So if you see a root system, for example, in a monoculture of corn, where strong winds just make them fall, it's because even though it's all moisture, the root system is going to go just where there's water and air. It just goes sideways. So most of the time where if you have some plants on those waterlogged, or on that case at the bottom part of the sandhills, yeah, the root system just is a compaction layer. So yeah, now how quickly you said, well, I don't know, that could depend on really sometimes the rains, how intentional you are, and so on. But remember, okay, you're talking about a problem, right? Mm-hmm. We need to focus on what we want, and then eventually we will correct those areas that we don't like. I mean, we don't like a lot of areas, and probably you don't like that, but is it the area that will produce you more, will give you the best return on investment? I don't know. Welcome.
Yep. One way up the back.
I just had a question about Pentamerus. It's pretty widely regarded in our area as a feed. On one of our properties, it's very, well, some people would say invasive, but I would have thought it's probably what you class as a subarachnoid perennial, and it does grow very well in the really rough, steep hillsides, which don't grow much else. I've been advised many times to replace, like spray it out and replace it, which we don't do. But yeah, are you familiar with that as a feed?
I missed a lot of the question. Sorry.
Are you familiar with Pentamerus as a pasture species?
No, not at all. No.
Right.
No, what is the game?
Pentamerus?
No. No.
It's very tough. I think it's African, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But is that a annual or perennial grass? Or?
Perennial.
Grass?
Yes. But it grows in winter, but also summer active if you get any moisture. There's always some green in it from the sun.
And let me tell you, I think we have that very common problem in many properties, but you just change the name of the grass.
Yeah.
Like we had this pink grass that grows also on our hills. And it was until, because sometimes we are not aware, but we are creating the conditions to favor that grass. Yeah. You know, your management is favoring that grass. So I think once we start moving to a bit more intentional grazing and try to hit that one and then come back with a long rest period. For example, a lot of people in the US don't believe that they can get over fescue or cheatgrass.
Yeah.
Well, we have a good example of these ranchers in Montana, where they had this cheatgrass. They were running 300 cows. Sometimes it really relates to the size of the herd, like to make more animal impact. And they changed the model. What they did was sell the 300 cows, build a good water system, and they brought yearlings. So now they are running a herd of 2,000 yearlings with that animal impact, even though you may lower the animals per acre, right? That's how you measure here, not pounds per acre, right? Animals per acre.
Yeah.
Wow, they are pretty, that is affecting the cheatgrass, and now they're seeing native plants.
Yeah.
Because that's historically, that's probably the animal impact that was supported in North America.
Yeah.
I was actually wondering if the Pentamerus was actually quite good in the harsh hillsides. It's not favoured here, but it grows in winter. It's also summer active.
So are you seeing that as a good grass, that you want more of that?
I'm wondering if that is the case. People say, oh, that's not good, you need ryegrass or whatever. But
No. Do you think it's good? Is it?
oh, the sheep eat it. They seem to go okay.
If you think it's good, just start managing for it.
Yeah. Well, we have been.
Okay.
I think the main difference we've seen is a lot of legumes growing through it during winter.
Yeah.
Then they die out, but the perennial stays there and it will grow if you get with the summer rain.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, for example, people in my context, they don't like much tobosa, the tobosa grass that is like the buffalo. But if you manage well the tobosa, wow, it's a great forage. Even more, they prefer tobosa in winter than other grama grasses there. Mm-hmm.
Does anyone here know what that grass is? A different name of it? Yeah, okay. Weeping grass? Weeping as in microlina? No. Oh, okay.
It grows, it doesn't grow that long, though it probably does get pussy tail, a foot long. No, it's not pussy tail.
Okay.
They could have called it pasture grass, but it isn't pasture grass. It grows very, very dense.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Came up as pussy tail grass.
What is it?
A very fluffy seed head, which animals don't really like.
Right, there you go. What's the botanical name?
Pentamerus pallida.
No, I still have no idea. Yeah, probably.
Oh,
Yeah, probably
okay.
an African grass. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, we've got a question just here. Yep.
Probably won't go down with the liberal farmers, but horses on smaller acreages, but you want to, start doing what you can to increase diversity and soil morphology and obviously all the regenerative aspects.
Yep.
Do you strip graze, like you've got a set stock, that's the numbers aren't really going to change very much. Do you strip graze to wherever you can get to and then sacrifice an area and feed hay that you bought from someone else, or how would you recommend managing
Okay.
that?
Yep. It doesn't matter what the animal is. It could be an elephant if you like, or a mob of elephants, or it can be a horse, or it doesn't matter. Use the same type of management. Put them together. Don't have one here and one there. Put them all together, and start moving them and rotating them, creating the recovery period. The recovery period is absolutely critical. As long as you can possibly create, and we're not talking about 30 days. We're talking about 6 months, a lot more, 12 months. But create the rest period. It doesn't matter what the animals are, but the recovery period is critical. Like I don't think there's any difference in a horse or a cow or an elephant. It's the same sort of thing.
And then if you, one way or the other, have to provide hay, then it's better to provide the hay on the pasture. So that's actually going to feed also the soil, right? Now, the other approach, which it may not be that simple, but is some people getting together and then rotating all the animals on different properties. Like, I have seen that also in bigger ranches where they're like cousins, they get along, they have the water, and they put 2 herds of 1,000 animals together, so they get a big benefit. Because let me tell you something, this is what we have observed. If you have 10 cows, no, let's say 100 cows in 1 acre, that's 100 cows per acre, or in the US would be 100,000 pounds per acre.
Yeah.
But instead of that, you have 1,000 cows in 10 acres. Yeah, mathematically looks the same, but it's completely different. So the bigger the herds, the less density you need, but actually the more results you get. Yeah.
One of the problems that people have, especially with horses, is underestimating what they eat. Like if you've got one horse there, just imagine that there's 12 or 15 sheep there. So, because that's what the horse eats, or a cow. So often there's too many horses on the farm.
Yeah.
So keep running out of feed and then having to buy feed and send yourself broke with them. So you're carrying capacity with horses. We should be thinking about it in the same way as we do with sheep, cattle, or anything else. But just remember that they're big animals, and if you relate it back to, gee, can I run 100 sheep on this 5 acres? Well, you say no. But if you've got 6 or 7 or more horses on there, that's what you're actually doing. So just be aware of that. Don't overstock it, which people often do with horses, and then send themselves broke buying hay and all that.
Yeah, I think it's not overstock.
Yeah. What I wasn't suggesting it was. I was just making a general comment. Yeah.
That would be true of a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
So can I just tack on to that, because it's our topic that Jen's talking about. We're actually establishing perennial pastures as well.
Yep.
So we've got a lot of native grasses on the property, and we're actually adding to that with sowing perennials.
Yep.
Now, the agronomist I work with has got me just doing 1 paddock a season, so I'm not shutting everything down.
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts on establishing the perennials? Because as soon as I sow my perennials, he says lock the gate and walk away for 12 months. Don't touch it.
If you're establishing a pasture and spending money, if you are, most people, because they've spent a lot of money on it, will tend to do that. Let it rest for 12 months anyway, because they spent a lot of money on it. So what you're saying, is that a good option, good thing to let it rest for 12 months? Oh, not a problem at all. There's nothing wrong with doing that at all. Yeah.
That ties in with Alejandro's.
Yeah.
Like grazing for half a day, then shutting it down for 12 months.
Yeah.
It's kind of essentially what I'm
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. And not only that, with horses, like you being a horse person, you'd probably know this anyway. They need a fair bit of roughage. They're not. Most people feed them rocket fuel and wonder why they go off their heads, you know. But feeding a turbocharged mix, they need fairly low protein feed. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.